So I hope everyone is doing well and that you had a good couple weeks. We're continuing our series with Dōgen, Dōgen reading. And of course, if anyone has a question about our practice, Zazen, or the text for reading, or about our sessions or practice in general, this is a good time to speak. I mean, anytime we're reading. So it doesn't necessarily have to be about the text. It might be something that we want to understand in our practice. So since most of us are practicing on a daily basis on our own, coming together once or twice a week, depending on how you meet, with a sense of Sangha is an important thing. So we should value this opportunity. And again, I'm just emphasizing, if you have a question or comment, please don't hesitate. Now, when we began this reading, and it's our second Dōgen text for reading, and this one is a little more complex in a certain way. As I said, it was the first he wrote when he came back from China, and he felt, Dōgen felt a strong mission, strong need to write this text in order to help his students, because he felt that in one of the passages, which we'll see, that you can be sincere and you can have a strong aspiration, a strong endeavor, and that's kind of your drive for practice and for freedom, for liberation, and ultimately for enlightenment, but get lost along the way. And even if you're in a monastery, and that can happen because either we don't have access to the right teachers, or the way we understand the teaching is perhaps, leads us in a misguided way. So he was trying to give a sort of a clear, in a Dōgen way, he's trying to answer that need. And the Bendōwa, which is called on the endeavor of the way, or the wholehearted way, or the practice of the wholehearted way, or the wholehearted practice of the way. What is underlying that term and that title is the endeavor part, the wholeheartedness, the real. It's not just the practice of the way, but that we have to discover within ourselves a strong motivation. And sometimes, the reality of dukkha doesn't open it enough for us. Everyone suffers, and dukkha is universal. But not everybody takes that dukkha as a strong way to arouse bodhicitta and the intention for enlightenment. If that were so, if dukkha were enough, then everybody would be on the path, because everyone suffers. But we see that simply experiencing dukkha is not enough. So Dōgen is, trying to encourage us and awaken, arouse bodhicitta, the aspiration for enlightenment, to be on the path and be committed. He's trying to do it not through so much the negative way of saying, dukkha, we got to escape dukkha. That is the sort of the Theravada kind of approach. But to give us that sense of vision and real vastness that practice opens to. And it's something that we can experience here and now. And so Dōgen wants to share that vision, because that's necessary to encourage us. It's not enough that we want to escape suffering. You know, I was saying this actually to my son the other day. I said, you know, it's not enough that you want to say, stop doing something. If you're going to stop doing something, he was talking about his future plans, there also has to be something else you want to arrive at. You know, it's not just about stopping one thing. It's about also, you know, going in a new direction. So what is your endeavor? What is your aspiration? And so Dōgen is opening up that positive aspiration of enlightenment, and not only the negative aspiration. The negative is really important to fully appreciate and understand. Is the sound not working? Hanan says. Can you guys hear me? You can hear me? Okay, so maybe Hanan, it's the internet connection you have. So yeah, we need those two sides, and Dōgen is helping us lift up and increase the positive motivation, and not only the negative motivation. Negative, I don't mean it's like demotivating me, but fully being conscious and aware of the reality of the first noble truth, dukkha, is negative motivation. It's saying I want to end dukkha and I want to end suffering. You know, there's something negative in my life and in the world, and that needs to end. In addition, though, however, the Mahayana and Dōgen in particular here, and I feel this is why he's bringing it to us. He's saying, you know, we need more. And to really endeavor and be inspired, you need to understand how great this is. So I feel that's what the Bendōwa is opening up for us. Is to understand, like, it's big. And sometimes we, in our, you know, individual lives, we miss that vastness of what this path is about. So I feel it's important to share this, and that's what the Bendōwa will help us with. On the endeavor of the way of Bendōwa, I'm using the text that Yonatan sent out. Apparently I had the same translator, but perhaps an earlier edition, so that some of the text was different. So I printed up the one that Yonatan sent out. And yeah, so that's what I'm doing. And from what I remember, we did read the first page, which was good, a good start. And we are going to skip some because it's a longer text than the other one. And so not all of it is going to be necessary for our needs. And okay. So I want to go to on the second page, okay, where he says at the bottom of it, he says, this is indeed the essence. He wants to tell us the essence of sort of the Zen way and the Zen path, and the essence of transmission. Okay, the authentic teaching of the Buddha house. The Buddha house, right? Beit Buddha. So, and as we read in the beginning of this, and this is what I mentioned before, where he says in the beginning of this paragraph, where he says there may be students who are not concerned with fame and gain, who allow their aspiration for enlightenment to guide them and earnestly desire to practice the Buddha way, like all of us here. They may be misguided, though. And he goes on and tells how we may be misguided. So even though our intentions are really pure, you know, we lose our way. And I think all of us can relate to that. You know, everyone has a pretty good heart, and we get lost. So Dōgen gives us this is what the teachers are there to help us with. And then he says, his intention, Dogen's intention in the end of this paragraph is, I wish to leave for students of the way the authentic teaching of the Buddha house. This is indeed the essence. And so now I'm just going to look at this where it's kind of smaller in the bottom of the page. The great master Shakyamuni entrusted Dharma to Mahakashyapa at the assembly on Vulture Peak. Okay, now that's quoting the Zen Sutra of the Flower Sutra. And this is not in the original teachings, the Theravada or Pali teachings. but in the Zen tradition. And there's this story that many of us know, and it's called the Flower Sutra. And it's where the Buddha is wanting to find a successor, the next person to lead the Sangha and to carry the Dharma to the next generation. And he goes to Vulture Peak, which is where the Heart Sutra was given. And he says in front of the assembly of all the monks who are already considered arahants, meaning they're already considered pretty enlightened, that, I want somebody to tell me what the essence of the teaching is. And some of them started to argue with themselves, with each other, and they couldn't decide what it is. And some were dumbfounded and couldn't say anything. And Mahakashyapa, he wasn't Maha yet, he was just Kashyapa. Maha means great. Kashyapa, so Kashyapa kept silent. And what the Buddha did, Kashyapa simply picked up a flower. That's why it's called the Flower Sutra. He just took a flower and picked it up and showed it to the Buddha without saying anything. And the Buddha smiled and he said, Maha, great Kashyapa now, fully understands the essence of the truth, and he's going to receive the full transmission. Transmission meaning like he'll receive the authority to be the leader of the Buddha Sangha. So this is what this is referring to here. So it was then authentically transmitted from ancestor to ancestor down to Venerable Bodhidharma. Bodhidharma is the person who founded Zen as a tradition and brought it from India to China, and then started teaching and transmitted the Zen tradition from India to China. He's considered the first Zen ancestor.
Did he pick up the flower?
Sorry?
To have a flower to give, you have to pluck it.
Yeah. Well, I don't know whether he plucked it. Maybe he found it on the ground. But yeah, maybe he did pick it.
If he plucked it, then there's really a lot of talking about the plucking, I think. If he didn't pluck it, why did it fall off? Did it die? I don't know. So there's something problematic for me in this story.
Yeah. Well, that's probably a good thing, because if it weren't problematic, then it would be too, too intuitive. So yeah, I think that there's always a problem with these stories.
Yeah,
I don't have that problem, but there's always, in every one of these stories, there's going to probably be a problem, and that actually makes it more real for us.
Why?
Because it's not like you immediately can say, oh yeah, of course. It means that we have to continue to struggle with it. Like if it was just a flower on a tree and he pointed at it, everybody would be like, yeah, of course we understand nature. Or if you were just like to smile and, to bow, we get it. Okay, that's why I said it's not intuitive, because since there's some sort of conflict there, it means then, as with all koans, and this is one of the koans in the tradition, as with all koans, there's something that doesn't fully make sense. And so you then have to carry it and try to make sense of it a bit, The meaning is not like given to you.
Yeah, well, I'm really just started to be exposed to the stories, and just the first stories already I find in I was exposed to very little stories, and then all of them had, or some of them had strange faults like this one, but I'm not yet understanding what you're saying about having the thoughts, because in my mind for now, if the story is something to contemplate on, it should bring you into the right direction and conclusion to fit after thinking about it, which is good, because then you think about it, makes it deeper, you understand it in that way. But like the story you told, if it's plucked or if it's dead on the ground, thinking about it will not necessarily bring me to the same conclusion as I'm, let's say, supposed to get to, or to strengthen it, or to have it understood on a deeper level. It would just make it, it seems like they didn't think it over very well.
Think it through. Wrote it down and it wasn't edited. Yeah, I think you're getting at the point of what koans are supposed to be. You see a koan and these short stories, which are teaching tools. And as I kind of said, there's sort of a bit of a challenge or a paradox involved in each one. And what that paradox does is it makes you have to, at some point, abandon your intellect, the intellectual understanding.
All right.
That at some point you work through. You don't abandon. Now, here's the important part of practicing with the koan. You don't abandon intellect at the beginning. You abandon intellect after you've exhausted all possibilities. But first, to get there, you have to go through all possibilities that it could mean.
Okay, and so maybe they're a little bit also indirect, to just, they don't say what they say, but they make you contemplate on other issues, perhaps. Maybe they are very sophisticated and they have several layers. So I'm not sure yet. And if it goes also on the emotion or the practice or the intellect, but okay, it was just something that as a beginner I start and I notice, so I want to to hear about it.
Well, you're noticing something very true. You're noticing something true and accurate, that these stories are not meant to be like metaphors and anecdotes that suddenly like make sense. You see, the point of a metaphor, for instance, is that you understand it, like you get it, like the metaphor makes sense, and that's why it we use it. But here it's not a metaphor. Like, he's not holding the flower as a metaphor of enlightenment. He's not holding the flower. The story is not a metaphor for something. And that's something that is hard to understand with koans, because we read stories as an analogy to something in my life or in life in general, right? And these stories are not necessarily analogies, right? They're trying to get us to use a different part of our brain, and the type of brain that is not, it doesn't reject logic, but it doesn't depend on logic.
There's a story, I don't remember it well. I will say it very shortly, just the part, because maybe that will, maybe then you know what I mean. Something about the cow, that the skin of the cow, if it's ripped off, then there are some bugs or vermin and so on. And does that ring a bell of any kind of metaphor that you know of something in the stories? No.
About skinning a cow. Now, I've heard, that sounds gruesome, but I've heard the one about...
Yes, gruesome, yes.
Yeah. But I mean, I know the one about killing a cat. That's a famous one. But the one about skinning a cow,
it's not that you skin the cow. It talks about if you don't have the skin, like let's say the cow has a wound, in that place there is no skin, so the bugs, they come there and then they suck on the blood of the cow, because the skin is not protecting the cow. That is the thing that they said there as part. And it was really, there were a few of these, and there were, seems like metaphors, but some of them, again, I found some strange faults, but they seemed like they were trying to be metaphors. And then again, I have this, but this example is taken from another class, I don't know how to call it, another Sangha, that I would assume it's the same, because Zazen, right? So that's why I said the thing with the cow. And the other classes also, both I started recently, and it's well, a guy that from Israel that on Zoom and has a few 3-4 people and come once a week to hear, and then he told this story. So that's why and again there I found, okay, this is not really totally there. So
so that story is odd, but what I will say though about the practice, rather than the specific story, I want to address the practice of koans and of using stories in Zen, because it's different, and it's a complete practice in itself. It's actually a very long tradition. And usually in the Zen tradition, you end up kind of developing in one way or the other through silent meditation or through koan practice of working through these stories. And with the stories, you end up having to meet daily or at least weekly with a teacher. And, the teacher would say, okay, well, what story are you working on? What koan? And you might say, Mahakashyapa, like the flower. And then he'll say, okay, what do you have to say? And then you might say your interpretation, and then he'll go, and that's the end of the interview. And then you have to wait till next week, and you spend the next week and then working on it. And what does it mean to work on this? So for the first few weeks or even years, some of these stories people spend years on. Okay. Like the famous one is, does a dog have Buddha nature? And Joshi said, no, mu, no. So people work through that mu, that word meaning no in Chinese. And what does it mean, mu? Like no, no, no. So they're just working with that word. They even just work with the word no. And here you might just be working with flower, or you might just be working with the Buddha smile. It's not necessarily the whole story that you're working with. You may be working with one element. What does it mean the Buddha smiled? Right? Like, what is the Buddha's smile here? And what is the flower that Mahakashyapa is holding? Okay. Right? And why doesn't he say anything?
So the whole teaching is giving meaning even to every word, and that is the idea to bring the whole understanding of the teaching into any aspect and then discuss it. For example,
because as a whole story, if you take it as a whole story, we're kind of then doing a sort of, it would be easy to fall into the mistake of doing a kind of literary analysis. And that would be a purely intellectual exercise, and a very interesting one, but it won't help you become more liberated.
And these koans,
yes,
these koans were written, each and every one of them, by several wise people for a long period of time.
So the koans were originally records, recorded records of exchanges between a student and a master and a teacher, starting around in the year 700 in China, and mainly between 700 and 900, or 700 and 1000. These exchanges happened with different famous teachers, and they were written down, and then they were edited to just the actual main teaching and main exchange. And then they were codified, meaning they were collected around the year 1100. And then that collection of either 48 or 100 or 12, those collections, there are 3 different main collections. And those collections then were used by different traditions as their main sort of textbook for teaching. So it happened from real exchanges that were recorded, edited.
Every time from one teacher, and it was not
No, many teachers.
No, but every sentence was only taken from one exchange between one teacher and student or students.
Yeah, each story.
Okay,
Yeah.
so it was not like they took the sentence and then started
No.
to think about it with the team of the smart people for a while and so on. So it can be also that even though a teacher is smart, it can be that they even put more interpretation than the original master had. It can be.
Yeah, it could be.
Yeah.
What ended up happening with some of these koans, well, with most of them, when they were collected, the editor of each collection, the person who collected them, he then added often a poem at the beginning, then there was the koan itself, the exchange, and then there was a poem at the end that he added and some commentary. So around the actual exchange, which is only usually a few lines, there's several paragraphs of writing that students then use to give them a sort of a way to get into it.
And that was one editor.
That was one editor, and then
which
other
has
people,
basically a huge impact on the koan.
Yeah, for sure. Now, the different collections had different editors at different times of history, and then later on, people added their commentary to it, like in the Talmud. Okay, so people added their commentary. So that happened, and even today, people are writing books about koans. You know, they take a koan and there'll be a, you know, you can buy a book on just one koan, and there'll be like Dharma talks given on this koan. So that's sort of like the modern version of it, you know. But basically, the point is that Zen developed into these two different streams. One was just sitting meditation, and one was working with these stories, koans. Okay, and then later on, and that continued. One is called Soto Zen, which is the sitting, and Rinzai is the koan work. Okay. And they have different teachers in their traditions. But by the time the 19th century came around, okay, and we had someone named Hakuin around the 19th century, in the 1800s, then he brought them together, these two traditions. And so in most places, at least in the West, and also a lot more in Japan, it's not just strict Soto or Rinzai, but you have them working together. So you're not going to find like, it may be a Rinzai emphasis or a Soto emphasis, but the Soto that just sitting, they're going to, in their talks, talk about some of the koans. And in the Rinzai, they're also going to be doing meditation. So it was separate for like, I don't know, maybe a good 800 years or 600 years. And then they sort of came back together. And that's where we are today.
The last thing I say, because we've talked, well, I keep on asking questions, but
yeah, but it's good because it brings this something that is brought up here.
I guess until a balance and a point. So the last little thing is that you personally, when you hear and you explored a koan, then it's not like after a while, then you got it, and then you got to the okay. Now this is the conclusion. It's not that you get one thing from it, but also it's ongoing. It stays a little bit open. It's an ongoing exploration for each going with your knowledge, or is it really okay? Now I got it. This is the answer. I understand this going, or it's somewhere in between, and that's it. I'm not gonna ask anything anymore.
It's both.
It's both. Yeah.
It's both. I mean, there is a part of the practice of koans is having a breakthrough where you do get it and then you move on to the next koan. That's part of it. But in order to have that breakthrough, you're seeing it in so many ways. And as you live your life, your experience then gives light to that koan, and you see it in new ways. And even when you get it, the getting it is not so much understanding the koan, but it's understanding pretty much life in general. And the koan was just sort of a way to see
reflect
life.
that back in different parts of
Yeah.
life, like to, okay. All right, thank you very much.
No, this is all important. So, and the reason we brought it up was because it started, this transmission and these stories are so central to the Zen tradition and the transmission here. So as we said here, we went to Bodhidharma and the transmission, it says, okay, so I'll just read again. Bodhidharma went to China and entrusted Dharma to the great master Huike, who is his disciple. This was the beginning of the Dharma transmission in the Eastern country, meaning in China. In this way, and this is what I want to get to for a second, in this way, and this is the third page, direct transmission, it reached Huineng, the sixth ancestor, Zen master Dōgen. Huineng was a really very important teacher. Then the authentic, and this is the sentence I wanted to emphasize here in when Dōgen is saying this is the essence. Then the authentic Buddha Dharma spread in China, and the teaching that is not concerned with concepts and theories took form. So this is where we're leaded to, and where we're leading to, and this is where the tradition is opening up, where it says the teaching that is not concerned with concepts and theories took form. This is a sort of, it's not anti-intellectual, but it realizes that there's something much more than the intellect that we need to awaken. And so this is what the teaching, when we're talking about transmission, is not that I got the idea, but I got the awareness. And so there's a different approach here, and you may not be able to explain that awareness to somebody else. But the transmission is, and that's kind of the flower, that when you meet someone who understands that awareness, you don't need to say anything. There's nothing to explain, right? You're sharing this path. So this is why we're not so concerned with theory here. And we're not negating it. But the question is always, how is this going to help you be more free? How is it going to help you be more awake? This is our question. Not how is it going to make me smarter, okay? But rather, how is it going to make me and help me be more realized and awake, okay? Is it developing my heart and my mind, big mind, in this situation? So that's why we're not so concerned with theory and concepts, okay? Now I'm going down to then how we do this. And how we do this, okay, Dōgen is very clear. And Dōgen, we have to remember, and it's important, and it's also useful, that we did explain these two different paths that developed in Zen. Why? Because Dōgen is considered to be the founder of Soto Zen in Japan. So he's considered like the founding father of the just sitting school, not the koan school in Japan. So all Soto Zen and all sitting in Japan goes back to Dōgen. And we can see from here, I'm looking at the third paragraph on the third page, although it says page 5 at the top here. It says here, now, it starts with now. Make sure we don't go crazy time. Now, all ancestors and Buddhas who uphold the Buddha Dharma have made it the true path of unfolding enlightenment to sit upright, practicing in the midst of receptive samadhi. Those who attained enlightenment in India and China follow this way. Thus, teachers and disciples intimately transmitted this excellent art as the essence of the teaching. In the authentic tradition of our heritage, it is said that this directly transmitted, straightforward Buddha Dharma is the unsurpassable of the unsurpassable. From the first time, and this sentence I want us to take to heart, from the first time you meet a master, without depending on incense, offering, bowing, chanting Buddha names, repentance, or reading scriptures, just wholeheartedly sit and thus drop away body and mind. So here we have Buddha telling us what the essence of the practice is. And he reminds us that it has nothing to do with great ideas and concepts and ritual. It has nothing to do with all the ritual that so much of practice in all religions is concerned with. That doesn't mean he's going to throw it out into the garbage and you know, he's not saying it has no function at all. But if you really want to practice the wholehearted way, as he expresses it, it has nothing to do with bowing, with study, okay, with ideas, with rituals, with incense, with chanting, all of this stuff, with scriptures. It doesn't matter all the scriptures. We can read this whole thing and not become better people. Okay. So what's that missing ingredient? He says here, it is just wholeheartedly sit and thus drop away body and mind. Now, the real koan here, if we want to put it that way, the mystery of this, is what does it mean then to wholeheartedly sit? What does it mean to wholeheartedly sit? If that is the essence of the way, and Dōgen said this is the essence of the way, is to wholeheartedly sit and drop away body and mind. So on the Bendōwa then is really about trying to understand fully what it means to wholeheartedly sit. What does that mean to sit? Now, when we sit, are we wholeheartedly sitting? You know, or are we just sitting because, I don't know what, we're half-heartedly sitting? What does it mean to wholeheartedly sit? And that in itself is a koan. Okay, that in itself is a question that, here's the other aspect of a koan. It's a question without an answer. Okay, it's a question without an answer. The question is the answer. To have the question in your mind when you sit, what is it to wholeheartedly sit? What is it to sit with my full body and mind in this moment? What is it? Whether you call it being present, whether you call it sitting still and, you know, being fully with your breath, whether you call it walking, whether you call it drinking tea, what is it to wholeheartedly sit? How do I bring my whole heart into something? Is it just about being mindful and about being present? Is that enough? Is it about caring more? Is that enough? So you see, it is a big open question if we want to pursue and develop the essence of this great way, is to ask ourselves, are we being fully sincere? You know, or is this kind of like a hobby? You know, this is sort of my spiritual recreation. And the rest of the day, I'm just like, you know, kind of, I wouldn't call it distracted, but I would call it concerned with other things. So what does it mean to wholeheartedly sit? Okay, now I want to get into, and again, if anyone has a question, please ask. But I want to read simply the next paragraph, and that will finish. With that, we'll finish for today. And that one paragraph is going to be enough for us. So this is where there's a line separating the section that we just read. The font is a little bit larger, and it begins with "when even for a moment." Okay. When even for a moment you sit upright in samadhi, expressing the Buddha mudra in the three activities, body, speech, and thought, the whole world of phenomena becomes the Buddha mudra, and the entire sky turns into enlightenment. Okay, that's really a quite fantastic and magnificent statement. So I'm just going to read it again for us. When even for a moment you sit upright in samadhi, meaning you have calm abiding. Samadhi is calm attention, present mind, focused on breath. So you can maintain calm concentration. Concentration that is calm and peaceful is samadhi, that you can maintain, okay, for a duration of time. When even for a moment though, so he says for one moment. Sometimes we think enlightenment needs to last, and he's telling us again, it's for one moment. If you can be in that space for one moment. When even for a moment, you sit upright in samadhi, expressing the Buddha mudra. Mudra is simply a form. We talk about mudra as like a gesture, a hand gesture like this. But a mudra here, a Buddha mudra, just seems the form of the Buddha, meaning you're expressing Buddha, and Buddha means awakened, right? So you're expressing awakening or an awakened being. Buddha is an awakened person. So you're expressing the form of awakening in your life, in all of your activities. So sitting upright is one thing, but he says also in the three activities of body, speech, and thought. Okay, your body is a Buddha form, your speech. Well, why would he say speech if I'm sitting? Because this is the point. Sitting is not only sitting. Sitting, okay, as a practice is all the activities of body, speech, and mind here. Is bringing the Buddha activity, the Buddha mind, the Buddha form into all activities of body, speech, and thought, right? Often we think that I shouldn't be thinking during meditation. It's impossible not to think. But if you think with pure and clear awareness, you're bringing Buddha into your thinking. If you speak and use right speech, okay, speech that is whole and not harmful, that is helpful and harmonious, okay, that's bringing the Buddha mudra into speech. And actions, whatever action do with the samadhi, maintaining samadhi, meaning that concentrated attention to my activity, that's bringing Buddha form into my activity. All right. So what we're starting to understand here a little bit, just here at the beginning, is that when Dōgen talks about wholeheartedly sitting, he's not talking about only sitting. He's talking about being wholehearted and bringing Buddha form into all of your activities of body, speech, and mind. And that now we're starting to see is that the path is opening up. It may start with the literal understanding of sitting upright. But then when he states that it's all forms, all activities of body, speech, and mind, we start to see that this is getting bigger than we thought. The whole world of phenomena, okay, all things that are happening in the world, not just your body, speech, and mind, but the world you're living in, all phenomena, the car passing, the dog barking, the toilet flushing, okay, all of the phenomena becomes the Buddha mudra, and the entire sky turns into enlightenment, okay? It's not that you are enlightened, it's that your world is enlightened. That's different. Because if it's about you becoming enlightened, it can be a very self-centered focus. It's like, I want to be enlightened in this terrible place so that I'll be able to take care of myself, And here we're seeing that there's no you being enlightened without the world being enlightened also. Right? So there's a sense of unity and universality here, of non-separation, non-duality it's called, so that your sense of awakening and having Buddha form in your body, speech, and mind is necessarily going to be found outside of what you consider the limits of yourself. Right? So that if you're expressing Buddha, then the walls and the computer and the bus and the other people are also going to be expressing Buddha. And otherwise, we're missing something in our understanding of what it means, to be awake. So, as you see, we're getting a little bit encouragement here. And I'm going back to the idea of Bendōwa being the positive motivation. So we're getting a sort of a vision of awakening and what it means to practice that includes not just all of your activities, but all the world that you're living in as an enlightened place. Accordingly, okay, let me just finish here. Accordingly, following this, all Buddha Tathagatas increased Dharma bliss. Tathagata is like just another word for an enlightened being. All Buddha Tathagatas increased Dharma bliss, the original source, and renew their magnificence in the awakening of the way. Okay. I mean, these are beautiful statements. Okay, kind of medieval in its feel. But again, it's giving a real positive view, a real positive view of this path. Okay, it's not escaping suffering only, right? It's the magnificence of everything becoming enlightened. Furthermore, all beings in the world of phenomena in the 10 directions and the 6 paths, including the 3 lower paths, at once obtain pure body and mind and realize the state of great emancipation and manifest the original face. So this is kind of what I was saying. And I'll just continue the last sentence. At this moment, all things actualize true awakening. Myriad objects partake of the Buddha body. And sitting upright, a glorious one under the Bodhi tree, you immediately leap beyond the boundary of awakening. Then you turn the unsurpassably great Dharma wheel and expound the profound wisdom, ultimate and unconditioned. Well, that sounds pretty amazing, doesn't it? But let's go over it for 1 second and then finish. I mean, I want to repeat 1 second and then I'll give a concluding thought that we can take home with us. Furthermore, all beings in the world of phenomena in the 10 directions. The 10 directions are the 8 directions on the compass. There's like north, south, east, west, north, west, northeast, southwest, southeast, and up and down. Those are considered the 10 directions. And then the 6 paths here are the 6 paths that a human being or all beings can travel in this world. 3 lower, 3 upper in the traditional Buddhist sort of metaphysical understanding, where there is a human level, there are like gods, jealous God level, and they're like Buddha level, okay? And then underneath that, there's like animals and hungry ghosts and hell. And each of those levels, those are 6 of them. And the human one is considered the best because it's the only one there where you actually have some choice. The other ones, whether it's blissful or whether it's painful, are going to cause you serious problems and limitations. Now, those are the 6 paths. So he says, in all the directions and all the 6 paths, including the 3 lower paths, which were, which were animals and hungry ghosts and hell realm, at once obtain pure body and mind, realize the state of great emancipation, and manifest the original face. Meaning, again, when you become clear and awake, and you develop your path of greater inner freedom, you start to see that potential in all beings. It's not just about you realizing it, but it's about seeing the world as a place where this is real and possible for all beings on all levels. And this is the expression here of a great universal awakening. Doesn't mean that the frog and the angry person and the soldier and the criminal are all like awakened as you. No, they're not. It means that you see all beings as having Buddha nature and original face, but not necessarily having realized it yet. But seeing that equality of all things and all people, right? That your awakening is not about you. Your awakening is understanding the nature of reality, which is true for all beings and all people. So then we start to view them differently, less division and more equality, much greater and infinite potential. And he's saying, but he's going a little more dramatic here. He says, at this moment, okay, I'm just repeating what I just read. At this moment, all things actualize true awakening. Myriad objects partake of the Buddha body. Okay, all things actually, are part of this awakening. And that is true because when you see truth, it's like you're seeing the truth of the world, not only as it could be in the future, but as it is now. Okay? So if you understand true awakening, it's not that you're seeing awakening of what someone might be in many lifetimes if they work really hard, but you're seeing the truth of their awakening, of their Buddha mind, of their good heart. We're seeing that truth, even if they don't see it. So yeah, all things, we're seeing the truth of reality. Okay? And when you have a moment of awakening or insight, it's not just an insight that you're having about your life. If it's if it's part of this path, of true awakening, then you're understanding all people and all things because you're not separate from them. And that's the big truth of emptiness. Emptiness is a term we use for non-separation. Non-separation means that all things are interrelated. So your awakening is also their awakening. And this is what he's suggesting here. Dōgen is teaching emptiness in his own really unique way, in his own really wonderfully positive way. Of teaching emptiness that, when you have a realization, it's shared by all people. They may not mentally know it, but you can know it. You can know it and see them as part of your awakening. That's the greatness of it, is that it includes all things. And that's why he says, right, you turn the unsurpassably great Dharma wheel and expound the profound wisdom, ultimate and unconditioned. Okay? So you start to live your life in that way, that is, really turning the Dharma wheel, which is turning the teachings. And everybody is turning the teachings in their own way. The reason we call it the Dharma wheel is turning the Dharma wheel is when the Buddha first started his teaching. And the very first teaching that the Buddha gave about the Four Noble Truths and teaching about karma and teaching about the middle way, those were the three main teachings that he gave in this first teaching. And the sutra is called the turning of the wheel of the Dharma, right? And so the Dharma is considered like a vehicle. It's a vehicle that gets you to awakening. And when you turn the Dharma wheel, and each person, is entering into the wisdom of their lives, when you turn it, what you're doing is you're turning the Dharma wheel for everyone. You're turning it for everyone, not just for yourself. You're turning the Dharma wheel. There's like the Dharma wheel in the world. So you're adding to the wisdom of the world. And in some way, it turns the Dharma wheel for all beings. So to some, what we want to sort of keep in mind a little bit is, is too general to say the greatness of this path. But what we can take away from this a little is that whatever awakening and whatever truth and whatever practice you do is not kept just in you. Whatever practice you do, whether it's practice that cultivates goodness and awakening, or whether it's practice that cultivates and develops selfishness and pain, either way, right? You're either turning the Dharma wheel or you're turning samsara. But you're turning it for all beings. This is what's important here, is that the great Bendōwa, the great way, is to know that your individual practice, sitting alone in your own place and doing your Buddha activity in your body, speech, and mind, however you do it, is turning the wheel for all others, not just for you in your life. And with that kind of acceptance of that, of how it's manifesting in your life, it can greatly motivate your practice so that your endeavor of the way becomes more wholehearted. So to start with, we increase our wholeheartedness by accepting that our practice is in some way touching everyone.
Want to ask? Guys?
So before we sit for another minute, is there anything else anyone would like to say?
Yeah, I would like to.
Close this meditation. Yeah, please.
Maybe I asked you this before already. There's still a lot of people out there who keep saying, since everything is Buddha, there is no separation, then there's no need to practice, there's no need to do anything. Because who is doing it? There's no one who's doing it. So there's no practice, no way. Even the great masters of Dōgen speak about Rigpa, and they say about immediate self-realization, that there's nothing really to do. There's, there's no Buddha actually. There's no any concept. So, what do you
Well, Dōgen actually addresses that very clearly. And I think it's in the Fukanza Zenji, where he says, all beings are naturally awakened, but awakening is not realized without practice. So we can accept that all beings, including ourselves, are awakened, but awakening and realization of your natural state are not the same thing. You can be deluded and naturally awakened. You can have Buddha nature, but at the same time be totally unaware of that and living your life like a criminal, right? So how do we fully wake up to the truth of who and what we are without it being, as he said here, the great transmission, as he said, and I take this to heart, and the teaching that is not concerned with concepts and theories took form. So when people are talking like that, I doubt they're talking about a realization, but rather they're talking about a concept. And to burst through the concept so that it becomes a mudra, meaning it becomes your form, takes a tremendous amount of work, right? To take the sort of inner and make it outer, meaning to take that inner life, the inner awakening, and it may be so inner that you're not even aware of it, okay? But it's the truth of your heart and mind, to take that and give it form. That's incredibly challenging, okay? Because it's so easy to remain with the inner and, dress it up with concepts and think, okay, well, now it's outer because I know how to talk about it. But Dōgen is clearly saying here, and I went over this a couple times, how do you express that mudra, the form of Buddha, in body, speech, and mind? How is it expressed in body, speech, and mind? This is the challenge we have, is to express it and not just think it. So thinking is one level, but how are those thoughts expressed in speech and in actions? Meaning what? The Eightfold Way, the Eightfold Path. How is that understanding expressed in the Eightfold Path? The Buddha taught we cannot separate the later teachings of whether it's Vajrayana or Zen or Mahayana. We can't separate those teachings from the basic founding, the building blocks that the Buddha taught of in the very first teaching of his Four Noble Truths and Eightfold Path. The Eightfold Path is the way we give expression, is the mudra. The Eightfold Path is the mudra, is the form of an awakened life. If you are not expressing it in that form, then it's just concepts and theories, right? So that's what I would say is I would say, okay, that may be true. Now let's talk about the mudra of right speech. Let's talk about the mudra of right livelihood, work. Let's talk about the mudra of effort and concentration and mindfulness. You know what I mean? So that's what I would say. I would say, you're right. Now, how are you expressing it? That's where it becomes, I think, we need these mudras. So don't go halfway. That's what I would say. Go all the way.
Yeah.
So unless there's anything else, let's close for a minute to sit and let go of all the words for a moment. Just dedicate this evening and the teaching to the well-being of all others. May all beings be happy. May all beings be peaceful. May all beings be free of suffering. May I live my life in such a way that contributes to that. And leads to ultimate awakening of myself and all others.